Do you remember the first time you went to a wild place? I do. I was 8 years old. It was a swamp miles from anyone. The only sounds were birds, insects, and the thwap of my rubber boots as I pulled them from the muck.
Conserving nature and choosing the path of sustainable development is a compulsion, not a choice anymore.
We really must protect and promote the pulse of the planet.
Oxygen is much more valuable at this time than gold.
Why do mountains matter? They're a source of fresh water for half the world's population and also contain half of the planet's biodiversity hotspots. Our Hindu Kush Himalaya sustain nearly 2 billion people with water and food. What COP26, the UN Climate Summit, decides today is going to affect us all tomorrow.
But all is not yet lost. There are solutions. Sustainable Summits is here to share some of these. We are an informal network of mountain stakeholders with a mission to relieve pressure on mountain environments and to influence their preservation for future generations.
We send this powerful message from the Hindu Kush Himalaya, the pulse of the planet and the world's highest and most beleaguered mountain range, to reach critical decision makers gathered in Glasgow.
Our Sustainable Summit's global mountain community will highlight some proven solutions to combat the climate crisis that threatens to engulf us all.
Since 2010, our band of mountaineers, scientists, policymakers, conservationists, and indigenous leaders have shared their expertise with practical outcomes in flashpoints around the world. Colorado in the USA, Mount Cook in New Zealand, Mont Blanc in Chamonix, France. And now we speak to you from Nepal, in the shadow of Mount Everest, Sagarmatha.
Please listen. In your hands and in our immediate action to avert this catastrophe rests the future of the planet and indeed all humanity. Act now. There is still time to pull back from the brink.
Definitely, I would give a call to the leaders of the world to please allocate your defense budgets to the true defense of this planet and humanity, not in this man-made calamity of wars that can be avoided. What is difficult to avoid, again, mostly man-made, is climate change. So you must have your food where your mouth is, and your insecurity and your threat is more from climate.
Climate change cannot be denied, but it can be slowed and eventually stopped. Our biggest hope right now is to put aside our differences and act together to fight it. There is no alternative.
Over the last few months, a series of recent scientific findings on global warming and its impact have sent alarm bells ringing.
It is found that rising temperatures could melt away at least 1/3 of the ice in the Himalayas by the end of the century. And that is an optimistic scenario, assuming the most ambitious climate change targets are met.
How badly will their disappearance hurt billions of Asians who depend on them to survive?
This is a climate crisis that you haven't heard of.
So I'm here in Johnson, in the central mountain region of Nepal. We have travelled, as you can see, over the mountain range, absolutely magnificent, but you can also see the fragility of the mountain range and what climate change is doing to it. I've had a chance to speak to some of the mountain communities here today, and for them, climate change has real life effects. Floods, droughts, landslides. And they've talked about the fact that because of what has happened here, whole communities have had to migrate, have had to move. And we need to address this issue head on. So on the road to COP26 and up at COP26, we need to ensure that the voices of communities like this are heard loud and clear so we can bring about change and tackle climate change for good.
Steps need to be taken beyond the individual and local, regional and international. We need agreements to determine those shared steps. At COP26, we need to recognize the importance of mountains for our planet. What happens in the mountains affects the planet. And COP26 is the platform to put forward an action plan to implement the Paris Agreement, the global treaty designed to address the climate crisis. The Paris Agreement includes 3 important goals: climate mitigation, climate adaptation, and financing.
This is a very important meeting because what countries put forward on the table in terms of how they'll implement these goals will have implications for our region for the next decade. So it's critically important that mountain voices are part of this debate and that mountain priorities are reflected in the actions that are agreed upon and then taken forward.
In our upcoming National Adaptation Plan, we will have different adaptation strategy for medium term and long term in different sectors. We are robust in terms of policy and we are well equipped in terms of policy and guidelines. Also, we have institutional mechanism to translate that policy into practice. First of all, our priority was adaptation, but now we also consider for mitigation as well, because Nepal is in developing stage. In the name of development, we need to be mindful for the environment, because we have committed net zero emission by 2050 and we need to take that target into account while doing the development works.
What has become clear is that mountain areas are especially effective and vulnerable to climate change, and the next decades are crucial for both mitigation and adaptation. UNEP's annual emission gap report tells us that pledges and actions on the Paris Agreement must get a lot stronger in build-up to the forthcoming COP26 in Glasgow.
So I'm particularly focused on supporting the race to resilience and ensuring that the 3 billion people that rely on the HKA mountains for their lives and livelihoods do not lose out to the climate change challenge. The World Bank estimates that climate change can push over 40 million people back into poverty in South Asia alone unless its impacts are reduced and better coping mechanisms are put in place.
This pandemic has clearly showed the essential need of taking care of our people and our environment, naturally, especially in mountain areas where adaptation faced to climate change are now mandatory. More than ever, we are faced to the increasing of the temperature, the permafrost melting, and the intensification of extreme events.
The financial sector is the most important link in the green and sustainable finance. So I would actually suggest that all the financial institutions should come together. We should have a expertise from the financial sector to drive this opportunity. towards green and sustainable finance. And also the financial sector must make commitment towards the green and sustainable finance.
Finance plays a vital role in the transition to a clean economy and building a climate-resilient future. The United States is mobilizing financial resources to assist developing countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and build resilience to the impact of climate change. Governments can support green capital flows by building climate-friendly business ecosystems and encouraging transparency in climate finance reporting and tracking.
We need those at COP26 to recognize the unique climate change threats to mountains and to invest in mountain-specific priorities to build the resilience of mountain communities at the front line of climate change impacts.
We at ICIMOD are working with our regional member countries to take forward the HKH to Glasgow campaign. Under this campaign, we have two objectives. The first one is to promote ambitious climate action for the Hindu Kush Himalaya region, and the second one is to scale up investment in mountain-specific priorities. There are three messages that we are taking to COP26. The first one is that the HKH is the pulse of the planet, and as such, it must be recognized as a global resource which supports 1/3 of humanity. The second message that we are taking forward is mountains of opportunity. So in order to implement ambitious climate action, there is a need to scale up investment in mountain-specific priorities. The third message that we are focusing on is what we refer to as the power of 8. And this really is about our 8 countries coming together, working together, and by doing so, being able to leverage better regional cooperation and international cooperation to really support or scale up investment in mountain-specific priorities.
The health of the planet is tied up to the health of the human population, and that they are two sides of the same coin. By 2030, the worst effects of climate change may be irreversible. Let us mark 2021 to profoundly re-evaluate our policies, systems, structures, investments, and most importantly, the actions on the ground to avoid extreme scenario we find ourselves currently in.
When we control the heating, we could have a normal life. There is no melting of snow and ice. We have water timely, not untimely flat and melting.
We know where we want to be. We also know how to get there. We just need to act. People need to rise up and do something. We have plans upon plans upon plans and strategies upon strategies, but where are we in the implementation? This is a call to action for all of us. We will not have it in decades to come if we don't act now.
For all of us, climbers, scientists, researchers, guides, businesses, communities that are inspired by the mountains and vertical spaces, that the mountains are where we find our inspiration and define our very being. We must all be part of the solution as individuals and organizations, and we remain optimistic, together through conversation and leadership, through hard work, that we will find solutions to this growing impact.
I have seen the impact of climate change on the mountains. We need COP26 to agree an ambitious deal that will make this summit sustainable. Together, we can make climate action possible. Let's stick together.
No one seeing the impacts of climate change on the mountains today can deny their importance. As ambassador to Nepal, I'm lucky enough to have flown over the Himalayas and trekked in the Everest region, and I've seen the changes firsthand. The call for action from mountain countries needs to be heard at COP26. Without increased ambition at COP26, we can't preserve the mountains. Mountains that, as Isimod have rightly said, are the pulse of the planet. Together, we can invest in the opportunities and deliver proven solutions that will make a real difference to mountain communities and to the health of the planet.
I think that the huge problem is basically, well, human greed for power and money. That if we don't reset, humanity in the future is in huge question.
There is tremendous potential for tourism. There is always the possibility of doing things the right way and getting beneficial results from it.
As climbers and stewards of our mountains, we must think into the future and take steps that may feel uncomfortable and possibly not achievable immediately. But we must start this process now. Goal 1. We must remove everything from our climbs and leave nothing behind. This is already required for climbers in Antarctica, and many climbers have achieved this on Denali. Our trash should be minimized and brought to certified disposal locations or brought home. Our human waste must be brought out and disposed of in certified compostable locations or in regulated sewage systems. Goal 2. Can we achieve a zero carbon footprint when we undertake our mountain adventures? You might say that seems far-fetched, but I say let's figure out how it can be done. If we can lay out a plan that we can begin working on this goal, let's start it. We can be leaders in the zero carbon footprint.
With so many glacial lakes and a number of them at risk of bursting, livelihoods, life itself downstream is threatened in the mountain communities. My plea to COP26 would be, pay attention to the need to safeguard the environmental integrity of our mountain ecosystems and of the lives and safety of the communities which live in and are part of those ecosystems. Just as we know that small island states are threatened by rising sea levels, so our mountain communities are affected by global warming very, very significantly. So to COP26, think about the survival of life of these resilient communities which have taken on every challenge ever thrown at them. But they need international support and solidarity now to face down the existential crisis of climate change.
It